everyone. I'm Rena Ninen. Thank you for joining us. We begin with the threat of a major hurricane making landfall on the East Coast. Tropical storm Florence expected to strengthen as it moves towards the Carolinas. A state of emergency has already been declared.
Good afternoon from Wilmington, North Carolina. We are coming on the air right now to bring you the latest on Hurricane Florence, which still has the Carolina coast in its grip and which has turned deadly.
My message today, don't relax. Don't get complacent. Stay on guard. This is a powerful storm that can kill. Today, the threat becomes a reality.
Authorities are telling residents here to prepare for days without power, perhaps weeks. They also fear the hurricane could flood some 16 nuclear reactors across 3 states. The Brunswick nuclear plant announcing tonight it will shut down, saying they are, quote, currently in the path of Hurricane Florence, and they anticipate the plant site will experience sustained hurricane force winds.
And, you know, we've mentioned power outages. Right now, moderate to severe power outages, but we could see this spread over much more of the South.
Four days before the storm hit, we had a staff meeting and we discussed the storm. But then we had meetings in the EOC with the extended staff, anybody who would be directly related to storm response. And we started our preparations. Although you don't know what any storm will do, and Florence did throw us a couple curveballs, we did get everybody together so we could discuss contingency plans, when we were going to actually activate the EOC, and start to make plans as far as what do we do as far as food, what do we do as far as rooms for people, are we bringing people in for mutual aid from other areas to help us out. So we started that planning very early on when we thought the storm was coming. At the time it was a Category 4, if you remember, and we were really preparing for the worst. You never know what's going to happen with a storm like this. You never know when a crisis is going to hit. So it's very important that you have your key staff here available 24/7, whether it be at 2 in the morning getting woke up that something has occurred. So you need to have certain staff available. So, you know, we had about 500 people who were directly involved in responding to the storm, although everybody supported the effort. But we had about 500 people of our 600 employees who were responding. More than half of those were required to be available 24/7. Most of them slept right here in the PwC building. It was like a hotel. But we had people staying and they were available, including all of the officers. All the officers were sleeping on cots, air beds, everything else. So we could be prepared if something happened, and we could be here to support our employees in the field should they need us as well. So I can't say enough about the officers and being here and being available and pitching in. You had officers serving meals, cooking meals, supporting the staff, going out there and making sure that they had everything that they needed to go out there and restore service to our neighbors and our customers. Well, this was a real key lessons learned from Matthew in our communications, because we're obviously a real key to communications. You have people on, from city council, the county. You had businesses who wanted communications, because obviously when their power is out, they need to know when it's coming back in. The city's looking at opening up some rec centers as shelters for people, so they need information for us. So what we learned during Matthew is you have all these requests coming in all at once, and we want to respond to them. But what we found was would be better if we responded on a regular scheduled basis. Therefore, you didn't have people calling in because they knew, hey, at the top of the hour, PwC is going to give us an update. And then we were fielding questions during that whole period of time, not answering them. So in our next news release, so to speak, we were able to get that information out there. And I've gotten praise from city council, from people on the county commissioners, from businesses that they really appreciated those regular updates because they knew when they were coming out and what to expect. So we did that, as you know, on social media. We did that, via news release through the newspaper. We used all of the ways in which we can communicate with people to get them the information that they needed and the information that we wanted them to have, so they knew what was going to happen. A new aspect of this was we allowed some of our customers and even employees to sign up to a text message string where we could also get stuff out, because not everybody has a Facebook account or not everybody may be on Instagram, but some people may want to get messaging on their text. So we opened up a way for customers and employees to sign up to get text mail updates, and that really worked great as well. I know that we had a couple hundred customers sign up, but that's more customers that we're getting the message out out to. And I know that we were getting a lot of things on social media. If you tell one person on social media, they're telling their neighbors. So it was very important to get that messaging out where we were in our restoration efforts.
As part of the Water Resources Division, we have 2 wastewater treatment plants and 2 water treatment plants. And with information and word coming that Florence was coming to town, all those facilities started gearing up and getting prepared for the storm. One of the real unknowns with this storm was the number of days it would be here and the length of time that there would be power interruptions. So we made doubly sure that we had plenty of chemicals on hand to treat the water and the wastewater, and we also made sure that our generators were in good shape to run, and that we even brought in some extra tanker loads of diesel fuel to make sure that we did not run out. So those were some of the things we did in preparation, and then the operators and the maintenance people that make all 4 of those plants run knew what their jobs were and got them done. The generators performed really well. They started up. We started them up Friday evening. And in most instances, they ran for almost 2 straight days because of the power outages and the fact that the wind was still too high for the line department to get out and start doing repairs. Of course, our customers realized that too, that the storm just seemed to go on and on and on. But we were able to meet that challenge at the wastewater and water plants. One of our other really big challenges was trying to deal with the high rainfall amounts and power outages at our wastewater lift stations. We have over 80 of them out in the community providing sewage collection. And when the power goes out and the flows come up, we had to send a fleet of Vector trucks out to try and keep those stations pumped down to reduce the amount of pollution that would be entering the Cape Fear River during the flood. So there was quite a bit of activity on the ground with Water Resources Construction, as well as our central maintenance people going out and trying to make sure the generators were running at the plants. If the flows were too high, figuring out which facilities had to have Vector trucks sent to them to keep them pumped down to prevent overflows. We also got in touch with the North Carolina Water Warren, which is a mutual aid association for utilities within the state of North Carolina, and made a request that they send us some Vector trucks. And very quickly, the city of Raleigh stepped up. They sent 4 trucks down. There was a two-man crew with each one of those trucks, and they were here from beginning until we closed up shop on Tuesday. And they did talk with our construction department manager, Chris Rainey, and he gave them very glowing remarks about their ability to understand what needed to be done, getting their work orders completed, getting to the stations that they needed to get to, and figuring it out. You can't be out there in the middle of a storm telling everybody everything they had to do. So these crews were very capable in knowing what to do, and so we just turned them loose, and they did an exceptional job. And City of Raleigh, we certainly owe a debt of gratitude for them for helping us keep our wastewater overflows down to minimum levels with all that extra effort. During the storm, we were 24/7 as long as we could get out there with these trucks. So we had to rotate crews, getting them out there and operating our Vector trucks, and also helping to coordinate with the contractors and the other mutual aid people that came in, helping direct them. They're not familiar with the area, so there had to be some assistance provided by them to help them get their jobs done. Fortunately, we only had one water main break early on in the storm, but it was not really related to the storm. And afterwards, we only found really one damaged sewer main where a tree had fallen and poked a hole in the sewer line, so we had to fix that. But much different than Matthew, where we had flash floods, really high volumes of water in very short periods of time. It made a big difference that we had 15 inches of rain, but it was over a day and a half. And with Matthew, it was like 15 inches of rain in 6 hours. So fortunately, our collection distribution system did not see a lot of damage, but of course the Cape Fear River rose to the highest level it's been since Jordan Dam was built. And a lot of people don't know Jordan Dam was built because of the historic flood in the 1940s, where the water came all the way up to the market house. So this was a pretty significant rainfall event, flood. And so that high water on the Cape Fear River, though higher than Matthew, presented additional problems. The Hoffer plant, Rockfish and Cross Creek sit high enough on the banks of the Cape Fear River up in this area that even though we reached a historic crest on the Cape Fear River, there really was no really close call with them getting flooded, which would have caused a real problem and did cause a lot of problems with other areas where elevation is such, like with New Bern, Lumberton, those areas, they just don't have high banks anywhere. So we were able to avoid some of that localized flooding, and equipment performed like it was supposed to, and the employees performed like they needed to, making decisions during the storm. And a lot of them came in early and stayed late doing their shifts and continued to provide water. So we were fortunate in some regard that we were never threatened by the high water of the Cape Fear River. But on the other hand, we were still able, under some pretty adverse conditions, to continue to deliver quality drinking water.
At the height of the storm, out of our 83,000 customers, we estimated that we had about 50,000 out. So out of our 35 distribution substations that we use to feed all of our customers, about 17 of them were out during the storm. So it had a tremendous impact on the system itself, taking out about 50% of it, and then all the customers that they serve. So basically, it was quite an impactful tropical storm. I think it was mostly because of the duration, how slow it moved, and how much wind we sustained, and the tree damage that we saw during that period of time. We had all of our PWC line, substation, engineers, basically everybody that was in the electric systems that could respond to the storm. We had them available for response, all the way to our GIS techs for doing mapping of where the outages were and providing maps to the crews for doing response. We had all those guys in place with the forecast of the storm, and we brought them in ahead of time and kept them in close proximity, either in hotels or right here at our facility, so that as soon as the storm actually subsided enough to where we could get out and do work, we did it. Unfortunately, with wind speeds in excess of 30 miles an hour, it really limited what we were able to do. The safety rules for that, pretty much at about 39 miles per hour sustained, we can still run low-profile vehicles. So none of the bucket trucks or digger derricks could really do much during that period. You really need the winds to get down below 35 miles per hour in order to meet the safety ratings of that equipment. So during the storm and after, we were able to do a little bit of restoration up until the winds got to those points. And then once they dropped down, pretty much around Saturday afternoon, we were out to get out and do some assessment and then target where we were going to do our repairs. And then most of what we could do with the bucket trucks and the rest actually happened on Sunday once the winds got to the point where we could actually do work in the buckets and the rest. Because of the slow-moving nature of the storm and the sustained winds for such a long period of time being above that 40-mile-per-hour level, it really did slow down what we could do as far as the tree removal and things of that nature, because we couldn't put the bucket trucks in the air. But what we did do is we did a lot of restoration, particularly on Saturday at the substations and the rest, that we could do without putting a bucket in the air. So we got quite a bit of our customers back on. I think we went from about the 50,000 mark to around 18,000, just in the first day on Saturday, once we could start getting out and doing some restoration on the stuff that we could get to. In this particular event, we actually brought in 7 contract crews just based on the forecast of the storm. So these are contractors that we already have doing line work for us and tree trimming for us. So we saw what the storm was going to look like and anticipated the damage. So we brought those guys in ahead of the storm. And as the storm progressed and we saw more and more damage to the system and more outages, we contacted Electricities, who's our area coordinator for mutual aid. So mutual aid is essentially the public power community has a system in place where we can bring in crews from other utilities across the United States to help us out in the event of a disaster. And it's organized, we have agreements in place, and Electricities actually coordinates this for us in North Carolina, where they can coordinate from resources across the United States based upon what we said we needed. So as the storm progressed, we decided that, okay, this is going to be a larger event and more damage to our system than we had originally anticipated. So we contacted them and had them start rolling mutual aid crews towards us. So we brought in 5 different crews from Electricities of Georgia, Athens, Tennessee, Greenville, Tennessee, Opelika, Alabama, and Huntsville, Alabama. I would have to say that I'm very proud of our own crews here. I think the electric division did a really great job of responding to the storm. Not just the line workers, they did an excellent job. I mean, they got out there and did what they know how to do, and they restored power. But we also pulled in a lot of different resources from our area. Our engineers actually took mutual aid crews and actually ran and did basically bird dogging for them so that the crews knew where they were going, how to communicate with our dispatch and all that. So we increased our capacity of what we could do quite a bit by pulling in those resources. So we not only had our line crews, underground crews, substation crews, but we also had the engineers, engineering techs, and even our GIS techs out and doing different functions in order to make sure that our response to the storm and our restoration effort was as efficient as it could be. So they did a great job.
We did have employees from each of the departments like fleet, the warehouse, customer service, even the officers were here, the construction departments were here, electrical engineering was present as well, and multiple other departments that were represented on the mandatory schedule to assist in the storm. We had employees with all different backgrounds and job positions that came together, even myself. We were out there taking care of the employees, from feeding employees, any employee issues, uniforms, what do we do with those, servicing contractors and taking supplies to them out in the fields. Our plant operations had employees that were mandatory to stay on site. So instead of them coming to the main campus, we went to them to service their needs from food and other type services that they may have been requesting. There was a lot of preparatory type of work that was done, and we asked employees if you had to go home to take care of family, we would allow you to do that. And they were on a mandatory list to come back and service our customers here. So we did have some that had some damages that were done to their homes. They secured that, and there's only so much certainly they could do. And then they returned and fulfilled the duties that they were called to do here with PwC, and servicing not only employees but the customers was our main focus. The finance division led the charge as far as meal preparation. How do we feed contractors? Do we get enough food? Do we have enough storage? What do we house employees that's planning to stay on site? How do we house contractors in hotels when we don't know if they have power or not to those facilities? So there was multiple type of issues that we prepared ahead of time. We had to address some while the storm was occurring, and even after the storm had passed. Some of the power outages that occurred, some of the grocery stores and food distribution centers where they didn't have power, they were losing operation on a lot of things, and so there was multiple issues that came about, and we had to shift on the dime, so to speak, to make things happen. But it all came together, and our employees pulled together, and particularly the ones that I serviced and worked with to make it happen, because we were feeding about 1,500 meals a day to employees. It's a big initiative that has to take place, being the municipality that we are, and we're family. And we know our employees have families, and they prepared their families as much as they possibly could to make sure they were secure and safe. And hat goes off to those spouses that allowed their spouse to come to work and service the community on a big effort. And it took everyone pulling together to make it happen. And a big thank you to them. And I think our employees stepped up to the plate big time to help out one another and get this community back up and going so that we can have a community vibrant and alive and continually growing.
Yeah, if my power had gone out, I knew that it would come back on. And I didn't know how long it would take, but I knew it would come back on reasonably soon. We had high winds. They were a bit scary. We're fortunate that our power lines are buried. But I've always thought that we were just blessed to have PwC, a hometown utility, here, because when you're a hometown utility, you care more for the customers and your people.
Well, while Hurricane Florence was in the area, we were without power. But when it finally came on, my son, I was sitting in the car actually charging my phone, And he ran out and said, "Oh, the power's back on, the power's back on." I was like, okay, well, let's just wait. Let's just wait to make sure it stays on, because I know sometimes it comes on and it'll go back off and then it'll come on, but it came on and stayed. I know the one thing that I do remember about the experience with Hurricane Florence is I was able to email someone directly in position with the power, and they responded with a response saying that we were on the main line because we are across where we live near the Cargill plant, and because it's on the main line, that power line has to come up before the others. So I was glad to hear that. And then when it came up, everything was good. Well, I don't do the Facebook thing, but I was following you all on the emails. You know, it was like an update, which was also, for me, it was a relief because it kind of let me know that things were happening. I saw the numbers dwindle, which was nice. And the one thing I thought, because I was thinking PwC, and then you hear about the other company, I was like, I'm glad I'm with PwC because they have a much smaller base, so they don't have to deal with all of the state, unlike the other one, which I was like, God, I can imagine how long it takes them to do it. But by the time when I was watching the news, when the television came back on and I was seeing that not PwC, but the other company was out there, I was like, well, PwC's almost done. Thank goodness I'm with PwC, okay? I wouldn't trade it.
Well, during Hurricane Florence, my daughter insisted that I come and stay with her and the family. And she only lives like 4.5 miles from me in Tiffany Pine. And on Friday night, I guess about 6 o'clock, the power went out for about an hour and a half. Then it came back on. So we were able to fix dinner, eat, and clean up, and then the power went off again. It was off for about an hour, and then it came back on again. But then it went off again, and then it came back on about 15 minutes later. So we were one of the blessed ones, no downed trees, just when, a matter of fact, we were sitting on the porch watching the storm go by. I wasn't too worried because I know that all the preparations started early, like maybe 4 or 5 days prior to, and I had seen PwC around in my neighborhood, you know, I guess prepping, making sure that the wires were good, and no trees was laying on them, everything. And I thought they were very expedient in my neighborhood and my daughter's neighborhood. I think much more about PwC now that I'm a member of the advisory board. I'm more aware. I check the alerts more often, and I just think they're really on the ball.
We manage the Hope 6 properties downtown and Eastside Green, which is right off of Cedar Creek Road. We have over 600 units, family and elderly sites right here across the street from PwC. And during Hurricane Matthew, they flooded. And so obviously with the river rising, we were very concerned about our elderly residents. We were on site. My whole staff, all of my company, my owner, we were all out there for days monitoring to see what was happening. PwC was wonderful because one of the things we were highly concerned about was if the waters rose and flooded our units. All of our tenants had utilities, which we appreciate that the utilities were on, but if it had flooded, obviously that would have made it a very scary situation for any kind of electrocutions or things like that. So we called and emailed Carolyn. People were talking to me. We were on the phone at night, emailing. Y'all were on the spot ready to turn off utilities if necessary. So, I mean, around the clock. And I really appreciate PwC working really hard to help us along with our residents.
I have to say how proud I am to be associated with PwC right now. This was an interesting storm. It was unlike Matthew, where we had everything happen in a very short period of time. We had a situation where we had to control situations for days rather than for hours, and that made a big difference. And I saw this team come together more like family. It was amazing to come in here and see people who don't normally work as a lunch lady or a lunch man, working as the lunch person, handing out lunches to hungry crews, and to see that kind of background effect that a lot of people don't see. We think only about the linemen and the water and sewer repair people when we think of these storms, but there's a whole team that's behind them making things work. And it was interesting to see the result of planning. Even when we couldn't get men up in bucket trucks to put the lines back up and put everything back in order, they were already going around and surveying where the locations were that needed the most work and what kind of resources needed to be in place so that as soon as the winds came down, we could put people up in trucks to bring our power back. And I think it's astounding to think with a storm the scope that we had, that 96% of our customers were back up with power within 96 hours. I mean, that's amazing to me. That's absolutely amazing. And using our automated metering system, we were able to determine exactly who was out of power for how long, where the biggest locations were where we had the most number of people out of power, how to bring them back up more quickly. I think that was extremely important. And then the other thing is we saw the benefit of planning ahead years ago, not just weeks ago, but years ago in changing our infrastructure, where the Utility Commission decided to go ahead and spend the money to upgrade our poles to steel poles, which resisted being able to be knocked over by trees, which kept most of our transmission lines up so that it wasn't as big a deal to restore as many customers as we did. So all in all, I think it was just it was a great idea to look and see the value of a hometown utility that makes planning for its customers a strong point of what we do. And I can't give enough shout out credit to the members of the county and the city and City of Hope Mills for the coordination that was done. We had a very streamlined coordination process where all the messages would be funneled through one certain person at each emergency operations center so that it could be properly distributed to the right places. We didn't have 47 different people trying to answer calls. It came through one location, which streamlined the operations and made the recovery a lot quicker. I want to also give a special thanks to the families of our crew members who, basically gave up having them home to help them through this really tough situation. I was able to be at home with my family and to make sure things were taken care of. But our crew members here, the people that were spending the night on cots and air mattresses, and one poor soul decided that she really just wanted to sleep on the floor in a sleeping bag. These people gave up so much of their lives, and their families gave up having them there to help them through this difficult situation. I think we really need to give them a special thanks. And then also, we had a number of crews come in from all over, different states from around that came in to help with mutual aid, and also contractors that we had in that also then sacrificed a lot of time away from their family and friends and risked their lives really to keep people in power. And I have to say this is one thing I do want to say I'm really, really proud to say. During this whole time, in those adverse conditions, working in very risky situations, even when the weather's good, we were able to restore people's power, keep people's water running without one single lost time incident. No one got hurt beyond maybe getting a cut on the finger. That's amazing.
Let's just kind of recap. We had 54,000 customers without power. We had our water and sewer plants were stressed to the max with rising waters from the Cape Fear River. And we also had a lot of unknowns. So, we're dealing with the crisis of the minute, plus trying to anticipate crises down the road. But I'll tell you, to a person, all of our employees who responded did it with dignity, did it with conviction, and the sole effort of wanting to get our customers back online. Because we all know that after the storm leaves and people have to clean up their yards and put their lives together, they need electric service, they need water service. That's something that they really need to begin to put their lives back together. So we know the important role that we play in that. And our employees are so dedicated to doing that, that many of them, for that period of time that we were here 24/7, from Thursday at 10 p.m. all the way until Tuesday at 5 p.m., those employees left their families, not knowing a lot of what was going on at their homes, so they could take care of our customers and their neighbors. And that kind of dedication you only get from a hometown utility.